Hello, it's me. You may recognize me from my other videos where I explore abandoned places, cemeteries, and everything in between. And today, we are doing something very different. Today, we are going to be spending the night in the most famous haunted house in the world. That's right. This is the infamous Amityville Horror House, and we're gonna sleep here tonight. And if you don't know what happened here, this is probably not the video for you. Because if you don't know the Amityville horror story, you probably have been living under a rock, or just haven't really been paying attention. But this is one of the most well-known haunted houses in the world. And if you don't know what happened here, basically, on November 13, 1974, 6 members of the Defeo family were found shot to death in their home. And ever since then, the house has had a pretty gruesome reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the country. I will be spending 24 hours here total, so I did arrive around PM last night. I went through a seance and I slept in the guest room right down there, and it was terrible. I couldn't sleep at all. I kept hearing footsteps. I kept hearing whispering, and around AM, got up to use the bathroom, and that's when I heard the scratching. And it sounded exactly like what you hear in the video right now. So we're gonna go back and listen to some of those audio clips I got last night. Right after I got done using the bathroom, this is when the scratching started. It sounded like it was right outside of my door. It sounded like someone was dragging themselves closer and closer to my bedroom. And I was sitting there listening to it getting progressively louder, and I didn't want to get my phone out to record it, because I was afraid that whoever was making the noise would hear me and come into the room while I was sleeping and do something to me. So I sat there frozen in fear for about 10 minutes, listening to this noise, and it never stopped. Well, at least until I turned my light on, and then it stopped immediately. So I'm gonna play these audio clips, and you can decide for yourself whether you think this is crazy or not. If you don't believe in ghosts, maybe you could write it off as just the pipes in an old house creaking. But I don't know. I personally think there's definitely something more going on here. But before we jump into the scary stuff, I do want to tell you a little bit about the history of the house. So this home was built in 1924 for George and Catherine Defeo. They were a wealthy couple who lived here for many years, and they actually adopted 3 children. The first child they adopted was named Mark, and shortly after they adopted him, his biological mother came back looking for him and demanded that he be returned to her. And they actually did return him to her, and she took him to California. And then 9 months later, the Defeos adopted another boy, John, but tragically, he passed away only 4 years later due to complications from the Spanish flu. Then 8 years after that, their third son, Peter, was born. He was the only biological child that the Defeos had together. And when Peter was a baby, the family moved to this home in Amityville. And the older brother Mark returned to live with the family as well. Then in 1945, George passed away. And in 1972, Catherine passed away, leaving the house to her son Peter. And this is when the story takes a turn for the absolute worst. On December 13, 1974, Peter invited over his friends, the Defeo brothers, to his home for Christmas. And allegedly, according to the defense, the brothers said that they were gonna go out and buy some guns. And when they returned, they opened fire on Peter, killing him instantly. They then went downstairs and killed Peter's girlfriend and 2 of their friends. And they also killed their own father, Peter Sr., and their brother, Peter Jr. All in all, 6 people were killed in this home in a matter of hours, and the motive for the crime was never really established. The defense tried to say that it was Ronald Reagan, which is the brother that was living in California at the time, but he obviously had an alibi, so that fell apart. And then the brothers claimed that they had no memory of the crime, and that they had no idea why they did what they did. And ultimately, they were convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder, and each sentenced to 6 consecutive jail terms. They are all currently out of prison, and the case is still unsolved to this day. This is just the official story, though. There's tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the killings, including the fact that it was a cult, or that it was satanic ritual gone wrong, or that it was even aliens. But again, all of this is just speculation. Nothing was ever proven. After the crime, The house was sold in 1975 to a family named Caputo. They ended up selling it just 4 months later, and then it was bought by a man named George Moss. And George was interested in buying the home to make a profit off of it. He wanted to open up a restaurant in the basement, turn the main floor into apartments, and then build condominiums in the backyard. But his plans fell through after a priestess predicted that blood would continue to flow in the home, and no financial success would follow. And it turns out that this prediction was pretty accurate, because over the next several years, George tried to sell the home several times, but every time he had someone interested, something strange would happen. Either he himself would get injured or sick, or sometimes things would literally fall apart around him. Like one time he was showing the house to a potential buyer, and the front steps just collapsed underneath them. So he gave up on selling the house, and instead decided to rent it out. But this didn't work either. One of the tenants only stayed for a few days and then left, claiming that they couldn't stand the evil in the house. And over the years, similar stories continued to surface. People moving in, claiming that they couldn't take the evil vibes in the house, and they had to leave. That was until Lutz and his wife Kathy moved in. The Lutzes were a normal family that just wanted a new home, and when they saw the price of this house was extremely low because it had been on the market for so long, they thought that it was a steal, so they moved right in. And just like everyone else, it didn't take them long to realize that there was something wrong with the house. They began experiencing strange things, like shaking beds, shaking pictures off the wall, doors opening and closing on their own. And George even claimed that his wife and children were levitating in their sleep. Now, I don't know how true any of this is, but this is when the whole story became internationally known, because George wrote a story about his experience and the local newspaper. The story gained national attention and eventually became a New York Times bestseller, and it was also adapted into a movie called The Amityville Horror. So this is what I experienced last night. After hearing the scratching, I got up and turned my light on, and it stopped immediately. I don't know if it was just my imagination or if there was actually something standing right outside my door, but whatever it was, it made me feel very uncomfortable, and I didn't sleep at all after that. I kept hearing the scratching in the vents. I kept hearing whispers in the walls, and then around AM, I heard what sounded like footsteps, and I know what some of you might be thinking. It was probably just the house settling. Well, I spent all day yesterday exploring this house, and not once did I hear anything. And yes, the house does creak. I'm sure it's 100 years old, but usually when houses are old, they tend to make more noise during the day when the sun is shining in and it's warm outside. But this was in the middle of the night, when it was freezing cold, and I heard what sounded like heavy footsteps in the upstairs hallway. Anyways, I'm gonna call it quits here. I don't think I need to spend another night in this house. One night was more than enough for me. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me to explore this haunted house. If you did, I'd greatly appreciate it if you give this video a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.